Our next guest has produced award-winning quilts with APQS machines since 1991.
She has appeared on over 50 quilting television shows, including our own TV show.
And she has taught long arm techniques for over 10 years in the United States, Canada, Australia, and Japan. Here she is, Marilyn Badger. Thank you.
With you guys.
Always good to have you.
It's fun to quilt with you. I'm glad to be back. Now, Marianne, I think that you have earned your master's degree in long arm machine quilting.
Really?
Anybody that can put a quilt on, get it quilted in 2 hours, take it off last night, bring it in here, put the binding on backstage to get it ready to go to UPS when we get finished, has earned her stripes. So, welcome.
I'm so proud. That's great.
Now, I think we should all see this quilt, don't you?
I agree. I think we need to see it.
All right, here.
Okay.
I'm going to check over the quality of the workmanship.
Oh, yeah,
we'll
we'll be quality control here.
I'm not proud of every single...
Oh, yeah, but gosh, it looks great,
Now, look at
Marianne.
that. Isn't that beautiful?
It's for my daughter's boyfriend.
Wonderful.
2 hours? Is that what you said?
I'd say 2 or 3.
Well, time flies when you have when there's nothing like a deadline to get you motivated.
That's right. We all have deadlines, so we know what that's about.
I think that's one of the main reasons for having quilt shows. Is so that it gives us a deadline to, and holidays like Christmas and birthdays and weddings. I always tell people if they're going to make a quilt for a wedding, or for graduation, if you're going to do it for graduation, it's not bad to start when your kids are freshmen.
Yeah, right.
If you really want to hedge your bet. And I have one that I started, let's see, my daughter's senior year of college, and she is now finishing her 4th year of med school. And I still have to piece the top, so I imagine I will be long arm quilting it in May for her graduation.
Well, or maybe it can be for her daughter.
Yeah. It's what I say. It takes a long time to finish a quilt when you're not working on it.
Right.
So, Marilyn, you're going to show us some great techniques. So, what impresses you the most? Should we just go on back to the machine so you can show us?
Sure. And when I first started researching long arm machines, and I'm not going to say how many years ago that was, forget it. But I had my husband go with me up to Quilt Market, and we checked them all out. And of course, he's an engineer, so I figured he would know what's good. One of the first things or major things that we zeroed in about these machines was the track system. And we felt that it was far superior to anything else out there, and it's totally unique to APQS machines.
Explain how that works. I mean,
okay, we're going to have to go back over here on this side so you can see them.
Right.
Okay, the track system is how the machine rides on the table and on the carriage. So when your machine is moving this way, the wheels on that attach to the table, that controls your horizontal motion. The wheels that are on the carriage controls your vertical motion. So these wheels ride horizontally. They are locked into that track. So when I take the handles back here and I try to rock it around, it doesn't rock.
It stays solid.
Right. I knew right then and there it wasn't going to vibrate. And those wheels are adjustable. So when you set your machine up, if it feels tight, if you can take a finger and push it like that and it keeps coasting, it's great. If it doesn't, then you adjust the wheels, loosen it up a little bit so that it rolls around with you, because you want to be able to accomplish those nice sweeping curves in your patterns, or smaller sweeping curves in your freehand motion.
Those little
that's
tight
good
ones.
to know. So very good.
Now, the other thing that is really important to me, since I was kind of gravitating toward competition quilting, I love to do that. That's just a real challenge, and it's fun to have your quilts out there. And even if you don't win, it's wonderful to be in amongst the competition.
But you're a winner very often.
Well, and so I realized that there are certain things you cannot do on a long arm without a stitch regulator. It's really important to have in terms of doing those intricate little outlines of appliques, very tiny little designs that you'd place on a quilt, and sometimes you can't see them that well, and so you need to be able to go slow around those.
Right, and just stop and take a breath, and for that super fine work.
As well as
those
stitching in the ditch.
That we do,
any kind of guide work when you're holding a guide. You used to have to push the off button.
Well, and you only have so many hands, and the stitch regulator gives you that minute to think without having to punch the button and go
That's right.
right away.
And the beauty of this stitch regulator is when I stop, it stops instantly. When I go, it goes. It doesn't have to catch up with me. It doesn't sit there and stitch up and down while I'm sitting there not wanting it to.
Yeah.
So I can get much more precision, much finer work for the competitions these days that you have to have because you know they get a magnifying glass on that
Oh,
beauty.
that's
So-
really tough to
Yeah.
do.
You got to judge between two perfect quilts sometimes.
Right,
and you have to look for something wrong so you can pick one or the other.
And many of the winning quilts in a lot of the big shows are stitched on APQS machines.
Oh, yes, they are. Lots of award winners. We've really broken that barrier.
Well, you, like you say, you have just the aesthetic quality of your quilts. It just continues to rise, and a lot of it is because of the features that you have on this machine.
Right, and even after, you know, okay, 16 years I've been doing this. Even after that length of time, I still see improvement all the time. So you're still learning the whole time you have a machine. It doesn't matter how long you've had it.
You just get better. You just want to get
That's
better.
right. You get more comfortable, and that's the thing about the machines. You need to be really comfortable. You need to be relaxed. The more relaxed you are, the more comfortable you are, the more confident you are, the easier it gets.
Well, show us some of your techniques, because
Okay.
you're always breaking new ground with designs, with use of thread, with innovative attachments, and I always love to see.
Well,
what
I
you're doing.
usually work with variegated thread, so I'm going to run around there and
And switch
tie on
thread.
another thread.
Yeah, well, that's neat because that's the way I thread a machine is tie off the.
That's right. See what you do? You just
break one.
break this beauty, and you can set it right over here on this spindle.
For later.
Put this one right here.
It's
and
the old serger trick.
tie a knot and pull it through, right? It'll go right on through the eye of the needle if the thread is not too big.
Yeah, because it is a larger needle, and I think it's great how you can just thread a needle by pulling the thread through.
All right,
There
Yeah,
it
just
comes.
keep coming.
It's coming.
There you
Oh,
go.
it came right through the needle. Oh, that's always
Nothing
good when
to
that
it.
happens.
Yeah, we want to see this. See, I like bright threads. I've
Oh,
always liked bright
really?
threads.
You sure?
And fabrics. And I usually stitch on about 11 stitches per inch. That's just something I like. And so I'm going to set my needle down and bring it up to bring my thread up to the top, like Dawn says. She's right on there. You need to have your threads up at the top so that you don't get a little boo-boo
What's
on the
good
back.
not to-
And when I'm doing competition quilts, which is basically all I do anymore, I don't do a start and a stop. I just set the needle down and go and knot and bury every one of those. So I'm going to turn my stitch regulator on, and I'll show you a little feather that I developed for Yellowbird, which is the quilt I'm going to show
We're
today.
going to look at that later too.
And so I started out by just kind of doing a little zigzag back and forth because I kind of think that tied in with his wings. And then I'm going to do a little feather. We go this way for a while, maybe about 3 or so. Get a nice long one there, and then I come over here on this side and go from that direction and fill that in with the feather. Get a little bit smaller right there in the middle, maybe one right there. Now I'm going to echo that and come right back around to the other side. You see how easy, I'm using a couple of fingers and just no strain at all.
But I noticed, like, if you weren't sure where you wanted to go next, with the
You got
stitch
time.
regulator on, you can stop, you can think, you
Yeah,
can look.
you got lots of time to think.
And without it, you got to keep going.
Right. Now, so here I'm going to do another little zigzag like that, and I kind of went up with his, these are kind of like bird tails. Then I changed directions like that.
I love watching you because you really are drawing with your needle. You know, you bring this artistry that is really fun to watch.
Well, I do a lot of drawing on paper before I ever stitch. And with Claudia's quilts, Claudia is my partner and very good friend that I join up with for competition pieces. And she does these fabulous one-of-a-kind designs. And they're always really interesting and unique. And I have to develop things that go into really interesting and unique areas.
It's the best kind of challenge, isn't it?
Yes, and so I put paper down on them and trace out those areas and draw to fill in so that I've got an idea of where to go when I step up to the
So
machine.
you're going to plan how you fill those spaces before you actually start stitching.
Oh, yes.
Hadn't thought of that.
When my children were in 4-H, the kind of the test rule in teaching them how to sew was, if we didn't think it was going to fall apart, we kept going.
Yes.
And I think that's important sometimes too, is to remember that you get better at things by doing
yeah.
and not by worrying about it. And
Right.
so there's nothing like practice. There's nothing like, you know, get some of those friends from our quilts from your friends and your relatives, and use those to practice on.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to pay you anyway.
Or make a few of your own as well. Yeah.
And some of your own things that are like, not so good. Okay, those are good practice
True
rules.
trade-off.
But when you take that quilt off the machine, when it's on there, you know every flaw that's there. But when it comes off, you don't ever, I challenge you to find them.
Well, my quilt we showed, there's a few, you know, we're kind of bobbling. I thought, Brian is not ever going to notice those. He's just going to snuggle into that quilt and be happy.
He'll
Well,
never
I
find
thought you did well, and the fact that Marilyn is awarding you a long-arm quilting degree is pretty
That's
I'd be
right,
happy
a
with an
master's.
undergraduate degree. You know, but I'll take anything.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fantastic. So.
Okay, any
So-
other techniques you want to show us?
Well, let's see. I can show you my Badger Blossom, which is very similar, or I can do a little Mediterranean Beauty feather. That's a feather from a quilt that was our very first quilt that we had in competition, and I developed it to fill in a background area. And once I've done it, it can almost look like it's done on a computer, you know, when you do it a few times. But I did fill up an entire big sheet of newsprint with it, put it up on my wall, and looked at it, you know, as if it were a design that I wanted to find out, you know, if there were any areas that I got too close to my previous stitching or had areas that were empty that needed work. And when I had done that, I was ready to put the fabric on and do it on a machine without marking anything.
That's beautiful, and I love how that thread looks.
The thread really makes it. And you can, if you want it to stand out even more, I can run 2 threads through the same needle, make it a little bit thicker.
Or use a heavier thread.
Right? Or if you wanted to get several colors together that you don't have in a variegation, then you pick those colors and put them together and run them together.
I think you did that on one of our shows one time, put double thread through there. That was cool.
Right.
Awesome.
Well, I'm always amazed by how your quilting looks when we just look at it on a piece of fabric like this. But what always totally fascinates me is how you integrate that into your quilts. So can you show us how you've applied some of your techniques on quilts?
I would
that
be
you've brought
delighted.
along? Which one are you going to show us first?
I'm going to show you my very favorite of all time that we've done together, the one that I developed the bird feathers for, and that's Yellowbird.
And that's the one over here.
Yes, and that is Claudia's original design. It's like a curvy pieced feathered star.
That's
very
Claudia
difficult.
Myers. Claudia Myers.
And when she sent it to me, this is how you can kind of develop your quilting for a quilt that a customer gives you. She sent it to me and said all of those little yellow spiky things in there reminded her of birds' wings. So then I went into research on birds, and I didn't want to do just a typical bird. I wanted it to be kind of mythical or whimsical or whatever. So I drew up my bird and actually made a template on the freezer paper. I put my freezer paper on the canvases, took out, put an MR5 needle in, which is a size 20, and stitched through the paper and made a stencil. And then I just pounced it where I wanted the birds. And the second quilt I have is Casablanca. It was just recently featured on the cover of Quilter's Newsletter magazine. And the exciting thing about that quilt is a group over in Saudi Arabia saw the article. That little corner block up there is their guild logo.
Oh, that's
and
neat.
They fell in love with the quilt, and now we have 50 ladies in Saudi Arabia making that quilt.
Wow.
So that's exciting. We're anxious to see them all.
That's very neat.
And that is a paper piece pineapple. It's her original design again. I actually drew everything out. All the patterns in that quilt that are stitched were drawn on golden threads paper and stitched through.
So then you stitch through the paper,
Yes.
and then you tear the paper away.
And it was a bear getting all that paper out of there.
Yeah, you cry.
Yes.
Yeah, but you can be real exact with your quilting.
Yes, because it was trapuntoed, and I wanted those feathers just so, because there's some unique areas there, I had to shape them around too.
Well, and I've found, even when I'm trying to follow design, the freedom with which you can move the machine, it lets you really guide it very, very accurately. And the fact that you can move the handles down to get your hands closer to the quilt,
The closer
helps
the quilt,
me
the
a little
better.
more accurate. It's like someone said earlier today, holding the end of a pencil and trying to draw, or getting your hand down by the lead. And this way you can bring your hands down to that level and really control when you're wanting to follow an intricate pattern.
Right. At one point, we used to be at a disadvantage because our hands had to be up here, and so the sewing machine quilters could get more precision. Now we're down there too. So.
Aha.